Chapter 4 of the Diamond Cross Mystery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James O'Connor. The Diamond Cross Mystery by Chester K. Steele. Chapter 4 Spotty. "Well, now," observed Detective Thong, and somehow or other his voice sounded really cheerful, "let's see where we're at, Mr. Darcy. Have you looked over the stock all you want to?" They were in a room in the rear of the jewelry store, the city and county detectives, the reporters, and James Darcy, with Policeman Mulligan on guard near the cut glass and silver gleaming in the show cases. On guard near a dark red stain in the floor, scarcely dry. It was still soaking into the wood. The body of the murdered woman had been taken away, followed by a sigh of relief from James Darcy, who, try as he did, could not keep his eyes from seeking it. "The stock is checked up as well as I can do it in a short time," replied the jewelry worker, who had spent some time going over the store under the watchful eyes of Carol and Thong. "I'm not sure anything is taken. If there is, as I said, it can't be much, but I'll go over everything more carefully, checking up the books. That will take a few days, but I can do it while I'm here arranging for the funeral." "Not here you can't do it," broke in Carol with a short laugh. "Not here?" There was startled amazement in Darcy's question. "No. Why not?" "Because you won't be here. You'd better come with us. You'll have to, in fact. The captain'll want to have a talk with you, and I guess the prosecutor the same. How about it, Jim?" And he looked over at Halliday from the courthouse. He was examining the side door leading to the alley. "Oh, sure, he'll have to be held as a witness anyhow," was the easy answer, and in the same breath he added, "Not a mark, not a scratch on the place. It was an inside job, all right." "Held? I'll have to be held?" faltered Darcy. "Of course," said Thong, "and while you're at it, take a friend's advice and keep your mouth shut." "You mean anything I say might be used against me?" "Oh, I wouldn't put it that way exactly. That's moving picture stuff. Theater business, you know. We don't go in for that, not me and Carol. But don't talk too much. Of course you'll have to answer a lot of questions, and the easier you do the better for you. But wait until they're asked. Maybe it's against my interest to say that, but I've sort of took a notion to you. Now you'd better get ready to leave." "You mean lock the place up?" "Oh, no. Somebody'll have to stay here." "Not me," interrupted Mulligan. "I haven't had my breakfast. I was just comin' in off dog watch when I happened to see what was goin' on here, the crowd and everything. I ain't goin' to stay." "Well, 'phone in, then, and get somebody," advised Carol testily. "Somebody's got to be here until we can look around more." "I'll stay for a while," said Halliday. "I'd like to look about a bit myself. I'll probably have to get the case ready for the prosecutor." "Well, let's be going, then," suggested Thong. "Shall I ring for the wagon?" His partner shook his head after a look at Darcy. "The trolley'll be all right for him," he said in a whisper. "We can get out the back way and avoid the crowd," for the street in front of the jewelry store was still thronged, in spite of the ever increasing rain. "As for King, he's asleep, and I guess we can put him to bed here. If we try to carry him out there'll be more of a push than there is now. Let him sleep it off." And he glanced at a huddled figure in a corner chair. "Who's asleep?" broke in the thick voice of the wastrel. "Whash matter, you fellows, anyhow? Man comes in, get a little present for his wife. Wife sits up all night waitin'. She's 'titled to li'l present. Where's my gold knife, Darcy? I gave it to you. Have grave pearls name. Where's my knife?" "You can have it pretty soon," promised Thong. "Look here, Harry, my boy, you're pretty drunk for a fact, but do you happen to know where you were and what you did last night and early this morning? Try to think. It may mean a lot to you," and he spoke earnestly. "Where were you? What did you do?" "What I did?" He blinked his eyes rapidly to rid them of the water which poured forth in an effort to assuage their drink inflamed condition, and regarded those about him with half drunken gravity. "What I did? You want to know what I did?" "Yes. Where were you, and what did you do?" asked Carol easily. "Ho! Got drunk. Thash what I did. Can't you see? I'm drunk yet, but I don't care. Ha! Had one swell time. Thash what I did. One whale of a good time. It was some night. A wet night, believe me, a wet night, awful wet. Never had so much fun, never. We got old Doc Harrison stewed to the gills. Hones, we did. Stewed like prunes, apricots. Oh, thash what we did." "Guess he wasn't the only one," observed Carol grimly. "Now look here, King, you're pretty drunk yet, but maybe you can get this through your noodle. There's been some nasty business, and you may or may not know something about it, though I don't believe you do, for you're so pickled now that you must have been loading up ever since last week. But you've got to answer some questions when you're able, and it's a question of holding you here or taking you with us. How about it?" "Look here!" snarled King, and his voice rang out with sudden energy. "Who you talking to?" "Now take it easy, Harry," advised Thong. "We're talking to you, of course." Harry King seemed to begin the process of sobering up. His eyes lost something of their bleary, misunderstanding look, and took on a dangerous glint. The detectives knew him for a spendthrift who had been in more than one questionable escapade. He had a violent temper, drunk or sober, once it was roused, and it did not take much liquor to make him a veritable devil, though after his first wild burst he became maudlin and silly. King came of a good family, but his relatives had cast him off after his midnight marriage to an actress of questionable morals, with whom it was not a first offence, and he now lived, after his own peculiar fashion, on the income of an estate settled on him in his better days by an aunt. Now and then he managed to get larger advances than the stipulated sum from a rascally lawyer, who took a chance of reimbursing himself 100% when Harry King should come to the end of his rope, a time which seemed not far off if the present were any indication. He was to inherit the bulk of his fortune when he became 35 years of age. He was now 33, but the pace he was going and keeping made his chances of living out the stated allotment seem meagre. "I'm talking to you, Harry, my boy," went on the detective, "and I advise you, for your own good, to keep a civil tongue in your head. If you don't, you may get into trouble. There's been a murder." "A murder?" King's voice was more certain now. "Yes. You saw the body carried out, or are you still so drunk you can't remember? It was Mrs. Darcy, the lady who owned this jewelry store, you know. Now pull yourself together. You've got to come with us and explain a little about this knife of yours. She was stabbed with that." "With my knife? That paper cutter dagger I was giving as a present to my wife?" King's voice was sobering more now. "That's the idea, Harry." "But I brought that knife to Darcy to have him engrave it." "That may be. It was used to cut the old lady, though, and laid back on Darcy's work table. Come now, brace up and tell us all you know about it." "Oh, I can brace up all right. So the old lady's dead, is she? Killed? Stabbed? Too bad. Minnie's a trinket I bought off of her for well, some of the girls, you know," and he winked suggestively at the detectives. "Old lady Darcy's dead? Say, look here, boys!" he exclaimed with a sudden change of manner, as something seemed to penetrate to his sodden brain. You don't for a minute think I did this, do you?" And he sat up straight for the first time. "Never mind what we think," said Carol. "We're not paid for telling it, like the reporters," and he grinned at Daly of the Times. "We want to get at the facts. Are you in condition to talk?" "Not here," interrupted Thong quickly, with a glance at the newspaper men, which they were quick to interpret. "Oh, it's all right, boys," went on the detective. "We'll let you in for anything that's going as soon as we can. You know that." "Sure," agreed Daly. "But don't keep us waiting all day. The presses are like animals. They have to be fed, you know. First editions don't wait for gum shoe men, even if they're of the first water. And I've got a city editor who has a temper like a bear with a sore nose in huckleberry time. So loosen up as soon as you can." They took King and Darcy to police headquarters in a taxicab, which King, with still half drunken gravity, insisted on paying for. Colonel Ashley, or Colonel Brentnall as he had registered at the hotel, having by means of a more or less adroit bit of camouflage obtained possession of the newspaper containing an account of the murder of Mrs. Darcy, and of the holding of her cousin and Harry King on suspicion, tossed the journal on the bed beside his well worn copy of The Complete Angler. Then, to demonstrate his complete mastery over himself, he picked up the book, never so much as glancing at the black headlines, and read: "I have found it to be a real truth that the very sitting by the river's side is not only the quietest and fittest place for contemplation, but will invite the angler to it." "I'm a fool!" exploded the Colonel. "I came here to fish, and first click of the reel I go nosing around on the trail of a murder, when I vowed I wouldn't even dream of a case. I won't either. That's flat. I'll get my rods in shape to go fishing to morrow. It may clear. Then Shag and I—" Slowly the book slipped from his hand. It fell on the bed with a soft thud, and a breeze from the partly open window ruffled a page of the newspaper. The Colonel, looking guiltily around the room, walked nearer to the bed, and then, as stealthily as though committing a theft, he picked up the Times. Softly he exclaimed: "Gad! What's the use?" A moment later, pulling his chair beneath an electric light, he began to read the account of the murder. Pete Daly's story of the finding of the dead body of the owner of the jewelry store was a graphic bit of work. He described how Darcy, coming down in the gray dawn, had discovered the woman lying stark and cold, her head crushed, and a stab wound in her side. None of the details was lacking, though the gruesomeness was skilfully covered with some well done descriptive writing. The wounds seemed to have been inflicted at the same time, one by the metal statue of a hunter found on the floor near the body, the other by a dagger like paper cutter, admitted to be owned by Harry King, but which, with the blade blood stained, was found on the jewelry bench of her cousin James Darcy. The solution of the murder mystery depended on the answers to two questions the reporter pointed out. First, which wound killed Mrs. Darcy? Second, who inflicted either or both wounds? There were ramifications from these beginnings, such as the motive for the crime, whether or not there had been a robbery, and if so, by whom committed. Then, to get to the more personal problem, did either King or Darcy commit the murder, and if so, why? Mused the Colonel, reading the Times on the evening of the day the crime was discovered. It may turn out to be a mystery after all, in spite of the two men who are held. Let's see now, and he went on with his perusal of the paper. The autopsy had been performed, and Dr. Warren had said either wound might have caused death, for the skull was badly fractured and vital organs had been pierced by the dagger, which the papers called it, though it really was a paper cutter of foreign make. King and Darcy were not as yet formally arrested, being detained merely at police headquarters as witnesses, though there was no question but that suspicion was cast on both. Under the law a formal charge must be made against them within 24 hours, and unless this was done King's lawyer threatened to bring habeas corpus proceedings for his client. "Oh, there'll be a charge made before then, all right," said Thong easily, when the legal shyster had, with threatening finger under the detective's nose, made much of this point. "I'm not saying it will be against your man, Mr. Fussell, but there'll be a charge made, all right." It is needless to say that both suspected men protested they knew nothing about the killing. King was frank enough, sober now, to say he had been drunk all night, spending the hours with boon companions in a notorious resort, a statement which seemed capable enough of proof. Darcy told over and over again how he had come downstairs to find his relative stretched on the floor of the shop, and aside from that little restless period of the night he had heard no disturbance. Sally Page could tell nothing. The maid was out of the city, and none of the clerks knew more of what had happened than they were told. Playing up Darcy's story, Daly and some of the other reporters speculated on whether or not a burglar might have entered the store, leaving no trace of his uncanny skill, and in his wanderings about the place have entered Darcy's room. He might even have attempted to chloroform the jewelry worker, it was suggested, and perhaps did slightly. Then, descending to the store, the intruder might have started to loot the safe when he was disturbed by Mrs. Darcy, who may have come down to see what the unusual noise was. Such at least was a theory, and one several took stock in. At any rate, Darcy, after having been aroused by what he knew not, had gone to sleep again, only to awaken to hurry down to do the repair work on the watch of the East Indian, the watch that was found so uncannily ticking in the otherwise silent jewelry store, clasped in the hand of the dead woman. It was mentioned that Singer Foote was being kept under observation, though no suspicion attached to him. Darcy had at first nervously and then indignantly protested his innocence, King continually doing the latter. Naturally there followed, even with the faint suspicion so far engendered, the question as to what the possible object for the crime could have been, presuming either man had been involved. It was known that King was constantly in debt, in spite of his allowance, and the more substantial advances he received from time to time. He had patronized the jewelry store, and he admitted owing Mrs. Darcy quite a large sum for a brooch he had purchased for his wife some time before. It was, of course, possible that he had, in his drunken state, gone to the store to get the paper cutter, which some peculiar kink or twist in his drink-inflamed brain had caused him to remember at an odd time. Or perhaps he had run short of money when playing cards, and have gone to Mrs. Darcy's store to borrow or see if he could not get something on which he might raise cash. Harry King was known to have been gambling the night before, the game lasting until nearly morning, and at one stage, when King was broke, he had excused himself, gone out into the night alone, and had come back well supplied with funds. Asked jokingly by his cronies where he had got the money, he had said a lady gave it to him. He resumed play only to lose, and had staggered out into the grey dawn, which was the last his companions had seen of him. He next appeared at the jewelry store after the murder. Sobered, King's explanation was that a lady had really given him the money, but who she was, or why she gave him funds at 2 o'clock in the morning, he would not say. He admitted calling at the jewelry store somewhere around 11 o'clock at night for the purpose of seeing if the engraving on the paper cutter had been finished. King was not so very drunk then, he said. He was just starting in. The store was closed, he said, but he added a bit of testimony that caused Colonel Ashley and others to think a bit. King said that, though the front doors to the store were locked, he, knowing the place well, had gone around to the side door in the alley, thinking that might not yet be fastened. He hoped, he said, to be able to get in and procure the present for his wife. But this door, too, was locked, though through the glass he could see a light in the rear room, and he could hear voices, which were raised louder than ordinary. The voices, King added, were those of Mrs. Darcy and her cousin James Darcy, and it was evident that a quarrel was in progress. Asked as to the nature of the dispute, King had said he had heard mentioned several times the name Amy. There was also something said about money and an electric lathe. Naturally there was an inquiry as to who Amy was and what was meant by the electric lathe. Darcy answered with seeming frankness that the Amy in question was Miss Mason, daughter of Adrian Mason, wealthy stockman of Pompey, a village about 10 miles from Colchester. Mr. Mason had what was often referred to as a show place, with blooded horses and cattle, and he was quite a financial figure in Monroe County, of which Colchester was the county seat. Besides this, Amy was well off in her own right, her uncle having left her a half interest in a valuable mine. James Darcy and Amy Mason were engaged to be married, though this fact was known to but few, and made quite a sensation when Darcy admitted it after his arrest. He and Amy had known each other since childhood, and when small had lived near each other. Mr. Mason, in spite of his wealth, was a democratic man, and though he knew, and Amy also, that she might have married wealth and position, both were passed up, to quote the stockman himself, in favor of a real love match, for that is what it was. "He's a man, that's what James Darcy is," Amy's father had said, when some one hinted that he had neither wealth nor family of which to boast. "He's a man. He's got all the family he needs. What's a family good for, anyhow, after you're grown up? As for money, I've got more than I need, and Amy's got a little nest egg of her own. Besides, Darcy can earn his living, which is a hanged sight more than some of these dancing lizards can do if they were put to it." It developed that the words over Amy which had occurred, just before the murder, between James Darcy and his cousin had to do with the difference in the worldly prospects of the two young people. Mrs. Darcy had rather laughed at him, James said, for thinking of marrying a girl so much wealthier than he was. "What did you tell her?" asked Carol. "I mean your cousin." "I told her I could support my wife decently well, if not in such state as that to which she was accustomed in her father's house. As for style, neither Miss Mason nor I care for it, and if things go right I may be able to bring her as much wealth as she has herself." "How do you mean, if things go right?" asked the detective. "Well, if I can perfect the electric lathe I am trying to patent," was the answer. "Oh, so that's what King heard about an electric lathe." "I suppose so. It's no great secret. I've been working on it for some time, but my cousin objected to my spending my time that way. She thought I should devote it all to her interests, even outside the shop. I told her I had my own future to look to, and we often had words about that. Last night's quarrel wasn't the first, though she was especially bitter over my work on the lathe. I have been giving it more time than usual because it is nearly finished, and I want to get it ready to show at a big Eastern jewelry convention." "And what was the talk about money?" "Well, Mrs. Darcy owed me about $1,000. I had done some special work on making necklaces for her customers, and she had promised, if they were pleased, to pay me extra for the exclusive designs I got up. The customers were pleased, and they paid her extra for the ornaments, so I demanded that she keep her promise, but she refused, pleading that many other customers owed her and times were hard. I needed that $1,000 to help complete my lathe model, and well, we had words over that, too." "Then do I understand," summed up Carol, "that the night Mrs. Darcy was killed you had a quarrel with her over Miss Mason and about the money, and because you spent too much time working on your patent lathe?" "Well, yes, though I don't admit I spent too much time, and I surely will claim she owed me that money. As for Miss Mason, I'd prefer to have her name left out," faltered the young jeweler. "We can't always have what we want," said Thong dryly. "Was the quarrel specially bitter?" "Not any more so than others. I had to speak a little loud, for my cousin was getting a trifle deaf." "And after the quarrel you went to bed?" "Yes." "And you didn't see your cousin again until when?" And Carol looked Darcy straight in the eyes. "Not until after she was dead." I guess that's all now." They let the young man go, back to his room in Police Headquarters. It was not a cell yet, though it would seem likely to come to that, for Thorn observed to his partner as they went down stairs: "Well, there's a motive, all right. 3, if you like, but none of 'em hardly strong enough for murder. Oh, I don't know. I hear he has quite a temper, different from Harry King's, but enough, especially if he got riled about the old lady talking against his girl. You never can tell." "No, that's so." Left alone, James Darcy threw himself into a chair and looked blankly at the dull painted wall. "This is fierce," he murmured. "It will be a terrible blow to Amy. I wonder if she'll have anything to do with me after this. The shame of it! The disgrace! Oh, Amy, if I could only know!" And he reached out his hand as though to thrust them beyond the confines of the walls. He bowed his head in his arms and was silent and motionless a long time. Up in his hotel room Colonel Ashley read the story of the case as printed in the Times. "This does begin to get interesting," he mused, as he finished reading the account. "There are 3 possible motives in Darcy's case and 1 in King's. And I've known murder to be done on slight or provocation. Darcy might have resented being called a fortune hunter, which I suppose is what the old lady meant, or he may have been stung to sudden passion by the holding back of the $1,000 and the taunts about his lathe. Most inventors are crazy, anyhow. As for King, if he was drunk enough and wanted money, or thought he could get some diamonds, it might be. I wonder who his lady friend is. He daren't tell, I suppose, on account of his wife. I wonder Oh, what am I bothering about it for, anyhow? I came here to rest and fish, and I'm going to. I've resigned from detective work. There." He tossed the paper behind the bed. "I'll not look at another issue. Now let's see how my rods are. I'm going to get an early start in the morning if this infernal rain lets up. Blast that shag! He's jammed a ferrule." And with blazing eyes the Colonel looked at one of the joints of his choicest rod. A brass connection had been bent. "That's a shame. It'll never work that way. Never. I've got to go out and see if I can't get it mended. Wonder if there's a decent sporting goods store in this part of town. I'll go out and have a look." He made himself ready, taking the 2 parts of the fishing rod with him. Inquiry at the hotel desk supplied him with the information as to the location of the store, and the detective was soon out in the wet streets, breathing in deep of the damp air, for it was fresh, and that was what the Colonel liked. Somehow or other the address of the jewelry store clung to his mind, and, almost unconsciously, he found himself heading in that direction. "Well, I am a fool," he murmured as he passed the place, now ghostly with its one light in front of the safe. The police had taken charge, pending the arrival of a relative of Mrs. Darcy's. Inside, the cut glass and silver gleamed as of old, but on the floor, sunk deep in the grain of the wood now, was the spot of blood, fit to keep company with the red rubies in the locked safe. "Quite a place," murmured the Colonel as he passed on toward the sporting goods store. "Quite a place. Oh, hang it, I must get it out of my mind." In spite of his rather exacting demands regarding a ferrule for his rod, he found what he wanted, and, feeling quite satisfied now as he noted that the weather showed some slight signs of clearing, the Colonel started back for his hotel, walking slowly, for it was not yet late. Just how it happened, not even Colonel Ashley, naturally the most interested person, could tell afterward. But as the detective was crossing a crowded street, a big auto truck swung around a corner, and he found himself directly in its path as he stepped off the curb. Active as he always kept himself, the old detective sprang back out of the way, but fate, in the person of a small boy, had, just a little while before, dropped a banana skin on the streets, and the Colonel stepped squarely on this peeling as he tried to retreat. There was a sudden sliding, an endeavor to retain his footing, and then Colonel Ashley fell prostrate, his fishing rod pieces spinning from his fingers. Down he went, and the truck thundered straight at him. It was almost upon him, and the big, solid front tires were about to crush him, in spite of the frantic efforts of the driver to swerve his machine to one side, when a slim figure dashed from the crowd on the sidewalk, and with an indistinguishable cry seized the Colonel by the shoulders, fairly dragging him with a desperate burst of strength from the very path of death. There were gasps of alarm and sighs of relief. The driver of the truck swore audibly, but it was more a prayer than an oath. The Colonel, grimy and muddy, was set on his feet by his rescuer, and several men gathered about. The Colonel was a bit dazed, but not so much so that he could not hear several murmur, "He saved his life all right." Recovering his breath and the control of his nerves at about the same time, the detective, his voice trembling in spite of himself, turned to the man who had dragged him from almost under the big wheels and said: "Sir, you did save my life. You saved me from a horrible death, and saying so doesn't begin to thank you or tell you what I mean. If you'll have the goodness, sir, to call a taxi for me and come with me to my hotel, I can then—" The Colonel came to a halting and sudden pause as he saw the face of the slim little man who had saved him, a face covered with freckles which were splotched over the cheeks, the turned up nose, and reaching back to the wide set ears. "Spotty? Spotty Morgan?" gasped the detective as he recognized a New York gunman who was supposed to have more than one killing to his credit or debit, according as you happened to reckon. "Spotty Morgan? You here?" gasped the detective. The rescuer, who had been grinning cheerfully, went white under his copper freckles. "My God, it's you, Colonel!" Further words were stopped by the detective's hand placed softly, quickly, and so dexterously as hardly to be seen by those in the crowd, over the mouth of the speaker. "No names here," whispered the Colonel in the big ear of the man who had saved him from death. The slim little man gave a wiggle like an eel, and would have darted away through the crowd, but there was a vice like grip on his shoulder that he knew but too well. "Spotty, my name's Brentnall for the present," said the Colonel with a grim smile, "and you'd better come with me. How about it?" Spotty Morgan hesitated a moment, nodded silently, and then, arm in arm with the man whom he had pulled from the path of the big truck, went down the street, the mist and rain swallowing them up. End of Chapter 4. Recording by James O'Connor. Randolph, Massachusetts, May, 2011.